This is all burst DPS. Just because I'm swapping targets where I'm in the same magazine, it just means the burst DPS calculation is resetting. Right, before we begin, little story time. I actually became, I'd like to say, pretty good friends-ish over the internet, as much as you can be friends with someone over the internet when they're like 4,000 miles away. But yeah, I became pretty good friends with Mr. Rousey over our mutual agreement that sustained DPS is mostly a null and void topic, as well as our borderline hatred of the talent fast hands. And yeah, bloody hell, I'm name dropping already, although I'm not going to drag him into this because we both pretty much have the exact same philosophy on sustained DPS, and that is, other than raid bosses, if you need more than one magazine to kill an enemy, you potentially have a different issue and shouldn't be trying to argue the whole sustained DPS thing anyway, because it's very clear you don't have enough DPS in the first place to actually deal with X scenario. So for the remainder of this video, you will see flashes on screen of when I enter sustained DPS. The reason you've not seen one yet is because I've not entered my sustained DPS calculations. Now, you only enter sustained DPS calculations when you pause damaging a target, reload, and then enter damaging that target again. This does not mean you get within one magazine, damage an enemy, get him to half health, move to enemy 2, kill him, then go back to enemy 1 all on one magazine. Enemy 1 who went to half health, then you killed the second, then you went back to enemy 1 again. He will still be in burst DPS calculations. The burst DPS will just be diminishing simply because you're no longer damaging him. Your sustained DPS would come into effect of you're damaging an enemy, you run out of bullets, you have to reload, you then shoot him again. Now, I have actually gone out of my way with Mr. Rousey, because he needed it done as well, to test DPS calculations on St Elmos. And yeah, we weren't actually impressed. Anyway, more on that in a minute, because I have concluded my strikers testings. And yeah, I got a few things wrong, so this is me correcting it. There are 3 builds, and they're all going to be dependent on how you actually want to play. Well, technically there's 2 builds, and then the third one is you change one mod. That's it. So we're going to show those first 2 builds, and then I'll show you the correction I made. So build 1 is basically what I've been running this entire time for the past few videos. 4P strikers, Grupo chest, Coyote's mask. We have 60% crit chance, and adding in Coyote's mask we end up with 177% critical hit damage. Build 2 is basically the exact same, apart from we are running Seska, and all of our crit chance mods have been changed to critical hit damage. This gives us at close range 52% crit chance, but 198% critical hit damage. Now, due to the way in which these 2 builds work, we end up just going down that really annoying rabbit hole again of where Grupo is better at close range by 1%. But then Seska is better at mid-range by 4 to 6% depending on where you're hitting. It then comes into question of, well, what range is actually the most optimal? In terms of accuracy, close. In terms of positioning, mid. Do you have control over this? No. Who does? The enemy. Do they want to stay back and be absolute little butt bags and just pinpoint accurately, slap you around the face with their little pistol from 3,000 light years away? Or are they actually going to try and bum rush you? Like, you have no control over this, so as to what way in which you wish to play is entirely up to you. However, I do have an alternative, which is this. It's pretty much the exact same as the previous Seska build. The only difference is in the Coyote's mask, where there's a crit chance mod, that used to be crit damage. That is quite literally it. So, literally changing the crit damage by 12 and then the crit chance up by 6. Mix close is the one we're looking at. It will do ever so slightly more damage, like 0.6 to 0.8, because both of the Seska and the Mix are compared to the Grupo. So it will do slightly more damage than the Grupo at close range. The Grupo is only being compared to the Seska close by the way, before you go, oh, it does 1% more. No, it does 1% more than the Seska, but the mixed close does 0.6 more than the Grupo. Yeah, weird. I can't get them to compare two things at once. It's annoying. Well, maybe I can. I'm just really bad at spreadsheets. Then at mid-range, yes, Seska's still going to win because it's got so much more crit damage. However, the mixed up one where we've changed one mod slot on Seska still does more than Grupo, but not quite as much as the full Seska crit damage setup. I would argue that this one, the mix, where we've just changed that one mod to give us 58 crit chance and 161 stat damage, it will give us 58 crit chance and 186 crit damage at close, and then 60 crit chance and 171 crit damage at mid. I would argue this is the most stable and highest DPS output set for St Elmos strikers at the moment. Now, just because I know someone's going to go, but what about Contractor's Gloves or Fox's Prayer? Well, out of the two of them, Contractor's Gloves are going to be the better option. Simple reason being, you roll your weapon to Detox, you put Fox's Prayer on, Detox is going to add to Detox. So this is going to give you 18% multiplicative damage. Whereas if you went Contractor's Gloves, the Detox on your weapon, which is 10%, is going to multiply with the 8% damage to armor, which gives you 18.8% multiplicative damage. So, okay, it's not that much more powerful, 0.8% more damage, but technically speaking, it does mean if you are having to pick between Contractors or Foxes, Contractors will typically do more damage just because it will multiply with the Detox. If we put that into our lovely little calculator, we drop an average of 3.61% damage. Contractor's Gloves and Fox's Prayer are going to be viable options. Don't get me wrong, they are going to be pretty damn powerful now because of St Elmos. They are now an actual viable option for this style of build, but they will not beat out Coyote's Mask on this type of setup. Now then, on to the blight of my existence. So yeah, I'm aware there's been other things going on, but as you can see just there was an elite grenadier who was under the effect of sustained DPS. I say effect like it's going to do something to him. Sustained DPS lately has been the bane of my existence because everyone wants to just get involved with but the St Elmos has got like a faster reload speed and like a 70 round mag and great. Like, that actively means nothing. It has the stats, the base stat values of a Police M4. In terms of sustained DPS, the Police M4 is the worst AR. If we're just going to look at nothing else and just compare sustained DPS numbers, Police M4 is the worst. So yes, it's got 20% weapon handling. This will increase the reload speed, and it does make it the second highest sustained DPS AR in the game. Eagle Bearer still beats it. Potentially as well Chameleon, but you would have to maintain the buff. From like a natural standpoint, Eagle Bearer, St Elmos, TKB. And it's at this point where I've mentioned him already, but I need to give a massive shout out to Rousey because he found a way to compare the two weapons, or several weapons, to St Elmos on a near similar build. And the reason I say this is because if you're going to compare these things, the builds pretty much need to be identical, but due to St Elmos weapon attachments, this becomes a problem. So he found a high-end build where you can slot in just by changing the holster, but still keeping the stats near enough identical of where we're able to compare these things. So we ran 3-piece Providence, Contractors, Foxes, and the only thing that changed was the holster. For St Elmos, we used Picaros. For the FAMAS, we used Grupo. Now before people started getting angry, but Grupo's got 15% crit damage and Picaros is 10% skill haste, their stats were pretty much near identical. The only difference between them was crit damage and crit chance, but not in the order you think. FAMAS had 60 crit chance, Elmos had 58. FAMAS had 174 crit damage, Elmos had 188. Now annoyingly, due to the attachments on St Elmos and where you're going to be near enough it's going to be impossible, really, to make a completely accurate, fair test because St Elmos attachments are just bonkers. So we have to make the best with what we've got. When we plugged this build in and calculated DPS as well as sustained at base flat value with this build, 3-piece prov, sacrifice the gift, so we've got 30% amp, 25 total weapon damage. The 0.9 multiplier for headshot, we've got 8% damage to armor, 18% damage to targets out of cover. The only difference being 58 crit chance versus 60, and then 188 crit damage versus 174. This is the result. Now, Elmo at base does actually hit harder by like 9k, but the burst DPS is in Famas's favour by like 200k. The sustained DPS is in Elmo's favour by 600k. Okay. Elmo wins in the sustained department, but in the burst DPS department, Famas wins. By the way, there's no talent on the Famas. Now, just because Elmo's is basically a police M4, we added a police M4 to the equation. I've added Elmo twice, there's no difference between the two Elmo showings, but Famas is the same as the previous one, and that is the pretty much exact same build as with the Famas with the exact same stats. The only real difference is going to be the RPM and the reload. And that does also highlight just how bad the police M4 is at sustained DPS. Then we added strained in. Yeah, both the police M4 and Famas beat out St Elmos in terms of burst DPS, although the gap in terms of sustained DPS is getting pretty damn close. Yeah. Then Rousey wanted to check fast hands. I'm not going to say a damn thing. I'm just not. Right. There is not much difference in the sustained DPS, especially because of the condition that sustained DPS comes under. Typically, you'll be moving in or away anyway, which basically means the argument of sustained DPS is completely null and void from the fucking off. The next point is, throughout this entire video, there's still a few more minutes to go, but throughout this entire video, I have killed a grand total of 183 enemies. There's still 3 more to come, but by the end of it, 14 of them were under sustained DPS, and at least half of them, I forced myself to go into sustained DPS. If you go back like 20 seconds, there's a red. I've got 44 rounds in the magazine. I'm looking at his head. He's on 1 health. I literally stop, reload, and pull my pistol out. I'm forcing myself into sustained DPS calculations. If I just played naturally, I maybe would have had 6, 7 actual forced sustained DPS calculations. Which means, in total, of all of my DPS done throughout this entire video, all I've actually done, I've not shown it, but you have to take my word for it, all I've actually done is cut out the part where I'm running from one location to the other. Anytime I'm shooting something, I have left it in. My total DPS output, only 3.28% of it is sustained DPS. Not only is the sustained DPS of St Elmos not actually that high, it's actually comparable to most other ARs, easily beatable, and it's not worth anything because you very rarely go into it. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.